You are listening to EE Times On Air, and this is EE Times Current. I'm Eric Singer. This episode was produced with support from Renesas. Our guest today is Annie Rue. She is a product marketing engineer in Renesas' mass market solutions team. She supports the real-world applications and systems where customers are building systems with Renesas parts and getting those products up and out there in the market with confidence and in a competitive way. Annie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So to start off, let's just set the baseline here. What is asset tracking and locationing?
If I were to define asset tracking and locationing, asset tracking is really the process of monitoring your location, status, and movements of physical assets to improve efficiency, reduce loss, and optimize management. And really in today's world, being aware of where something is and how it's doing, whether you're a big company that's concerned about your assets in a warehouse or factory, or even if you're just like a consumer worried about things like, hey, where are my keys? Where are my luggage at the airport? Everyone to a certain extent really wants to have awareness for things that's important to them, where they are, and how they're doing. And now the term locationing might be unfamiliar to a lot of folks. It's a term that we've been really leveraging at Renesas to kind of champion the next generation of asset tracking. So it's not just about like, hey, my package is at this one point at this specific time, but it's more about the having locationing that's more dynamic and intelligent, seeing things move in real time, getting updates very transparently to really understand how your assets are moving and doing in real time. And this is something I'm really excited to share with you guys in today's podcast.
Yeah, I love the example of just tracking something as simple as your keys or your luggage. That's certainly something we can all relate to. Some of us more than others. So as we look at that as sort of the smallest example of how this works, can you explain, let's take this to an industrial level and tell us a little bit about how asset tracking and locationing solutions, what are those solutions from Renesas and how do you look at this?
There's all sorts of things you can track. You can be tracking things from an industrial level, really a large scale. But in our everyday lives, we as consumers also track like a few things of our own. And at Renesas, we really see locationing as a technology that you can integrate into your systems. And locationing, as a technology is a little bit tricky to work with. And so solutions, but even just content and resources can go a long way when you're working in this space. And for us at Renesas, some of our solutions, range from both hardware and software, but also to partner services. And this really encompasses the entire ecosystem and the process of leveraging these technologies within your systems and design, no matter what phase you're in. So from silicon and hardware, such as our Bluetooth Low Energy System on Chips, or SoCs, software development kits, and more, we have the solutions, but also the resources. So, if you're trying to understand like, hey, what is one of the locationing technologies that I'm talking about today, we have white papers, blogs, demo videos, and a lot of other getting started resources that really help you understand and get started with integrating some of the most cutting edge locationing technologies with that end-to-end solution and support.
So you mentioned Bluetooth Low Energy SoCs. Are there other key technologies that Renesas offers for tracking and locationing?
A lot of our locationing technology really leverages Bluetooth system on chips. And so the Bluetooth is going to be kind of that foundational technology for a lot of the ranges that we kind of see today, whether we're talking about triangulation locationing, such as with our asset tracking and locationing at scale, what we call Atlas, whether you're doing something for wireless ranging, which is very similar to channel sounding, or even crowdsourced locationing. So if you have an iPhone or if you have like an Android phone, you probably have awareness of AirTags or Find My Device stuff. So all of those are going to be working on our Bluetooth systems. It's just really, how do you want to find that technology?
Yeah, obviously different applications and different types of equipment and different environments would influence that. Can you give us some more examples of real-world applications that you're actually seeing implemented in the field today?
One of the examples we as a company really like to showcase is Carnival cruise ships, if you guys know of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So those guys, when you're on a cruise ship, there's a whole bunch of people on there. And so the really neat thing about the cruise ships is, hey, let's say I'm kind of at the poolside and I'm relaxing. Maybe on my phone, I'm just going to download the Carnival app. I'm going to order a drink or something like that. Now, if I'm hanging out on a cruise ship and these cruise ships are massive, right? How is the staff going to find me to bring my drink out? And so Carnival actually uses, I believe, two of our locationing technologies. One of them is Atlas, another one is Wyra. And so no matter where you are on that cruise ship, if I place a drink order, I place a food order, the staff can find me. But also, typically when you go on a cruise ship, you might have other party members, for example, whether that's a child, a spouse, partner, friends, something like that. Again, the cruise ship is like massive. How am I going to find the rest of my party members there? And so that's also using our locationing technology to be like, hey, my mom is on like the second floor of the deck and I'm over here chilling on like the third or something like that, right? So that one is also a really neat success story, but also one of the use cases that we have been able to share for some of our locationing.
What a great example. I mean, yeah, a poolside drink delivered to my lounge chair, sign me up.
Yeah, heck yeah. It's like super convenient too. But that's also something that, when you say locationing, that's not an end use case that automatically pops up in your head. So it's super neat. So in addition to, I can't find my keys everywhere. I'm like notorious for losing my keys. So I have like an air tag on that. That one is using crowdsourced locationing to be like, hey, I'm going to go on my iPhone now. I'm going to see where the heck did I leave my keys, So that's also a more consumer use case application of the CSL.
Annie, because our audience is very technical, I would love to dive a little bit deeper. Can you take us through a little bit more how CSL and your other technologies actually function?
I can explain all three locationing technologies that we have for sure.
That would be way cool.
CSL is probably the one that us as consumers, we're all familiar with. Most of us probably have an Apple phone or like an Android phone. And so you probably have the Google Find My device or the Apple Find My network. And so this one is really using aggregated signals from distributed devices. So let's say I'm in a city and I opt into the Apple Find My network. Based off of my phone and then whoever else in the city, let's say my neighbor, the guy who owns the shop down the street, if they've opted into this network, those phones kind of function to be like, hey, this is where I'm at right now. If Annie is at Annie's house, it's kind of signaling out over there. If Joe down at the ice cream shop is also in that network, then it's kind of using that signal data to be able to be like, hey, if I left my keys maybe in the parking lot or something, it can kind of identify based on the phones that have opted into this system.
Oh, that's interesting. So does that mean that if I got an air tag on my keys and I leave it in the middle of the Mojave Desert and there are no other devices around, that's not getting found, right?
Yeah, you are not finding that, unfortunately. The thing is, the locationing quality for crowdsourced locationing is going to be contingent on how many devices are within that network. So let's say if you just land somewhere and everyone is just using Apple phones, they've got beef with Android phones, for example, and I have a Google Find My device. Well, if there's no other device that has opted into that network, well, I guess you're probably going to have a harder time finding your device, right? And it's exactly like you said, if there are no devices within that area opted into that network, you're going to have a little bit of a harder time, but probably not even able to find your specific item. Now, the nice thing about CSL is it is global. So if I go from like New York all the way to like San Jose, I can still track my luggage if I have my AirTag in it. So that global locationing is pretty versatile for a lot of like consumer and applications that need to be more dynamic.
Yeah. So let's say if I'm not in a populated area or on a cruise ship with thousands of other users on there, what are some of the other technologies in addition to crowdsourced and Bluetooth low energy systems?
From our end, if you are trying to use locationing that's not crowdsourced locationing, it would kind of depend on your use application. Let's say, pretend I'm like a farmer out in the Midwest and I kind of want to keep track of, I don't know, maybe if I like lawnmower robots or something. Let's go like super futuristic here.
Yeah.
I have a whole bunch of farming robots that's kind of going around the field and stuff. One thing I could actually use either Atlas or I could use our Wyra technology. Again, both are going to be Bluetooth. So if we're kind of talking about deployments like this where we're not around the CSL network, you could really go with something like our Atlas technology, or you could go with Wyra. So, how Atlas works is that Atlas is a triangulation method for locationing. So, a lot of angle based calculations. You have a locator in your system which has these antenna arrays, which listens for beacon transmissions from tags, which are things you kind of put on the item you want to locate. So if I'm out in a field and I have these little farming robots and a whole bunch of them, like 100 or so, because it's a big field or something, I'll have a tag on my robot, and maybe I'll have certain locators kind of like stuck up at this specific intervals. And so by having these locators, they're going to be listening for the beaconing on these tags to determine where the robots are within a given space. And so the benefit of this one, specifically for deployments like this, is power. So you're going to have lower power consumption on these tags because they're not really transmitting anything. They're just kind of beaconing to the locator. So you're going to have lots of battery life on here. And then another one is actually the at scale portion. So in my example, I'm giving you a couple hundred farming robots. Each locator can do quite a bit of tags simultaneously. I think actually you could go up to 500 tags per locator per second. So if you need some real time, hey, where is my farming robot right now? This is going to be a really neat one for you. Atlas, because it functions off of triangulation, the one thing I kind of want to emphasize about our Atlas technology is the at scale portion. And so if this thing can track up to 500 tags per locator per second, these are really ideal for warehouses, right? I don't
Mm,
know if you've ever seen a few images of how the Amazon warehouses work.
yeah.
It's crazy in there, right? There's like thousands of packages just kind of flying through per second. If I was, working in that warehouse, where is my specific package? If you lose track of something, especially now in today's world where as consumers, I'm starting to hold a lot of my deliveries to a much higher standard than before. If it doesn't come in on time and I don't know where it is, we kind of have a problem, right? And
Mhm.
so Atlas is actually really good for these applications because not only can it handle a really, really high at scale, high volume kind of locationing, but it's also really, really accurate. So you can actually get down to sub-meter precision on here with
Wow.
plus minus 50 centimeters. So even if
Wow.
a small package, I could tell you exactly where it is in a warehouse. I could also talk about one of our second technologies, which is Wyra. This stands for wireless ranging. So Atlas would be a connectionless based one because your tags are just beaconing to your locators. It's just kind of one way in a sense. Wyra is going to be a connection based, but also proximity based locating technology, very similar to channel sounding. So, as opposed to triangulation that's being used in Atlas, this one is actually using trilateration. And so, if I were to dive in a little bit more to the technical detail, Wyra uses multiple tones at different frequencies to kind of measure the phase difference between peers. So, if I have one device with one Wyra and then another device also on the Wyra, based on your phase difference proportion from when these signals are traveling to one another, we can use this to determine distance. And so Wyra is actually really, really good in RF hostile operations. So it has something called multipath cancellation, but also it has resiliency to 2.4 gigahertz noise. So in my example of that cruise ship deployment, that cruise ship is made out of steel and stuff like that. So if I'm a poor signal kind of going around, that's going to be really not so great for me, right?
Yeah. You're like in a floating Faraday cage.
Exactly. So it's just that's where Wyra really excels. Even when signals are attenuated, you still retain pretty good accuracy, I believe, also within the sub 1 meter accuracy. It is also really good in comparison to other locationing methodologies like RSSI, which is receive strength signal indication. Wyra you could use both indoor and outdoor as well, which is really neat.
That's a great breakdown of the current state of the art and science. How do you see the market for asset tracking evolving? You've talked about these absolutely unprecedented speed and volume of things like current warehousing operations. So, how do you see asset tracking evolving in terms of new demands or industry trends? Where are we headed next? And how do the solutions from Renesas fit into that picture?
So I know I kind of teased it in our discussion earlier, but we're not really seeing higher volumes of traffic for deliveries. So in the example I've provided with Amazon, those guys are doing like global shipments, right? At your warehouses, you're not just tracking a couple hundred packages now, you're tracking like on a scale of thousands. So being able to scale up is really important. And that's something that we're actually really, really good in. So I think we're actually best in class for the at scale portion. So you can track up to like thousands of packages. But then when you're looking at certain locationing technologies too, when you have conventional Bluetooth 5.1 SIG, or I think even ultra wideband, when you have to deploy locators, the locators themselves are kind of costly. And so if I have to deploy locators and they always have to be within line of sight, so like my tag is still visible from my locator in a way. And not only that, if pretend I'm in a warehouse again and I have 1,000 tags, these are all speaking all at once. So there's
Yeah.
10,000 signals now. How can you ensure that everything is robust enough that I can still tell where everything is, even in something that's super noisy and there's signals flying everywhere? And so this is one market trend that we're really seeing here, and one that Renesas is really equipped to kind of help customers go out into market with, is that at scale, higher volume tracking.
Can you share any specific stories or case studies where a customer worked with you all and your asset tracking technology to solve a particularly tricky problem?
I know that we kind of talked about the Carnival cruise ship one, where that one is using both our Atlas and our Wyra technology to kind of be like, hey, where are the party members of my cruise ship are? Where are the passengers so I can get stuff out to them? I think it's deployed on the little medallions that each guest has. But we've actually, this year at Embedded World, we've done our own demonstration for user badges. So we've actually deployed on like the little lanyards or like the name badges, our Atlas technology. So we've installed different locators into the little conference event venue. And, these conferences, right, especially at
Yeah.
places like Embedded World, there's a lot of people.
Yeah.
When you're trying to find something or you're trying to work with the technology, it's like, oh, I know the guy. You want to talk to my engineer, Jakob, for example. Where the
Yeah.
heck is Jakob in this venue? There's like 20,000 people here. And so Atlas has also proven that, hey, I can find Jakob based off of my screen. I know exactly where he is in this conference area, and I can get you to the right engineer. I could get you to the right resources and people who are wearing these name badges. So that's also another really interesting use case that I'm excited to share with you guys that we've done recently too.
Those are both really cool examples, I think not least of all because they're not relying on a person carrying their phone in their pocket, that you're able to actually deploy these SoCs on something like a cruise ship badge or even a name badge at a conference. That's really interesting to get away from the needing to carry around the brick in your pocket or be reliant on other Apple users or other Android users. So looking ahead, let's break out your crystal ball here. What are you most excited about in terms of future developments in the space or new features or innovations that you're looking forward to rolling out, whether it's in the very near term or even a few years down the road?
Locationing is kind of tricky to work with. And so when we're talking to engineers and we're talking to designers wanting to find new use cases for locationing and asset tracking, it can be hard to get started. For example, we have really neat reference designs that we're rolling out in addition to things like system block diagrams. So maybe I want to go thousands of packages per second. So we have Atlas, but then we also have other SoCs which can support Atlas Lite. So there's a whole wide range of scalability from our system block diagrams, but also reference designs. So if you want to kind of just get a build of materials, kind of get started right with hardware and software, this one actually kind of following off of our previous question, we're actually seeing some new developments within camera integration for locators too, right? And so
Ah,
this one's like super neat, like the Apple Store. You have phones and devices which are really displayed openly. They're not locked up anymore, right? And a lot
mhm.
of businesses now, if you're trying to sell or display a product, having it locked behind a glass case where your customer can't really engage or interact with it, it's not going to
Yeah.
sell super well as if you have the ability for your customers to engage with it. You could also deploy one of our locationing technologies on here. So, for example, with Atlas, you can put a tag on one of these showcase devices, have it out on the floor, and in these locators through things like geofencing. Hey, if someone just grabbed my thing and started wandering off with it, my locator might have a camera system where I can integrate some theft protection in there or vision AI capabilities to be like, hey, this guy kind of ran off, so I kind of already grabbed a screenshot and started recording the situation for you, you know? But also those Amazon grocery stores where all you do is you just grab your item, put it in a basket, and then check out. And so, again, that could be a really neat Atlas application where, hey, I have tags now on these items that customers want to buy. And when they get out to your checkout location, your locator might have a camera on it to be like, hey, we're just doing a double check and a scan on these goods to make sure, like, yep, we definitely got everything kind of secured and in place. You're all good to go. It really enhances the customer buying experience as well.
Yeah, I love that example because, thinking about it from a human perspective, combining our vision with our sense of space and bringing in an extra sense to narrow that down. That's really cool. Annie, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your insights, your own knowledge, and as well as a glimpse into the future for what you and Renesas are working on in this space. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
That brings another episode of EE Times Current to its end. EE Times Current is available through the major podcast platforms, but if you get to us at our website at eetimes.com, you'll find a transcript along with direct links to the other stories we've mentioned and other resources. EE Times Current is produced by EE Times at Coop Studios. Our engineer today was Chris Wright. Thanks again to our guest Annie Rue and to Renesas for underwriting this episode. Thanks for listening.